Live from the Talking Joe studios, it's Talking Joe.
Talking Joe Weekly Podcast. Talking Joe is there. Talking Joe thought we would last. Talking Joe is there. Find each other like a married couple. Our podcast on the air. Talking Joe is there.
Talking Joe is the code name for a completely untrained special podcast force. Its purpose, to produce a regular comic review show while breaking and replacing a series of presenters from across the world.
Talking Joe. Talking Joe is there. Talking Joe. We are on our soapbox. Nobody seems to care. Fighting for fandom wherever there's trouble. The podcast on the air. Talking Joe is there. Talking Joe. Talking Joe.
Talking Joe is on the air.
Hey, it's me, Mark, and welcome to Talking Joe, the best and longest running dedicated comics podcast that comes out on a Thursday. Today we'll be looking at G.I. Joe issue 280 with a very special guest. But before we get into that, let me introduce the Gandalf to my Bilbo Baggins. It's my co-host, Tim. How are you, Tim?
Hi, Mark. Wow, does that mean that I'm taller than you?
You are when you sit up high in your chair with your camera tilted down to your nose, and I'm looking smaller. Yes. If you measure us with a ruler, perhaps not.
I think it's Gandalf's first line in the movie version of Fellowship of the Ring that I use often as an example for my students about making sure that your characters are introduced clearly. Because I love that Gandalf says Bilbo Baggins. He says his name, but sort of everyone who uses a name. Right, everyone who uses a name in that entire trilogy of movies like mumbles the name, like Bilbo Baggins. So I actually don't know anyone's name in those movies from the movies themselves.
Well, it would be as a teacher, it would be unfortunate if your catchphrase was a different element, which is "None shall pass."
Let's talk about G.I. Joe.
Okay, so joining us today is comic artist, Friday the 13th fan, and wearer of unorthodox pyjamas. It's Ron Joseph. Ron lives in Virginia, but is currently in California. He's working on science fiction comic project Endanged with writer Jon McCarthy. Previous work includes 7 Cent Solution, Micronauts, Revolutionaries, Mask, Transformers, and most recently, Rom Dire Wraiths. But most significantly for us, he worked on the Cobras Venom arc in G.I. Joe's issues 256 to 260 in 2018, and the most recently published issue just out 2 or 3 days from recording time. It's issue 280, and that's the issue we'll be talking today. Greetings, Ron. Welcome onto the show.
Good morning. How are you? I have to ask you one question. Unorthodox pajamas. I'm actually wearing them right now. Where did you get that little nugget?
I didn't tell you about the secret hidden web camera feature of this recording device. It's Facebook.
Which ones? I'm just curious. Which ones did you see? Right now, I'm wearing my Spider-Man top and my red and black flannel bottoms.
I believe it was a unicorn pajama set with
I forgot about that.
Headpiece.
My son likes to get me these onesie. I don't know what they call them. He got me a Ted. Remember the movie Ted about the Mark Wahlberg and the teddy bear? What is his name? Seth MacFarlane?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, he got me a pair of Ted pajamas, and then he thought a unicorn would be funny, and I have to humor him, so I put them on and take pictures.
Excellent, and then put it out so that the likes of me can put it in your plotted biography. Excellent. So, thank you very much for joining us, and to give some listeners some context of what's going on. I'm down in the south of UK. It's 3:30. Tim is over on the East Coast, and it's what is it?
It's
10:30 your
Yeah.
time, Tim.
Yeah.
And Ron is all the way over on the west coast of USA with the surfing girls, and it's 7:30 in the morning. So that is dedication. So thank you very much for joining us at this early hour.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
And to illustrate the time difference,
Beverage for the show, do-do-do-do-do-do. Beverage for the show, do-do-do-do-do-do. Now I am gonna go, do-do, and drink my beverage for the show.
in terms of our beverages for the show, I'm sort of energizing my afternoon with some Pepsi Max. It's a bank holiday weekend. I feel I can indulge myself with something a little bit harder than my regular water or cup of tea. And are you on a cup of hot cup of Ron Joe? Sif?
I am.
Does that work?
Drinking Joe while talking Joe. I think I made that bad
Excellent.
joke in an
Drinking
email.
Joe, talking Joe. Oh, that would be a good title for a segment. Nice.
There you go.
Very good. So yeah, thanks for joining us, Ron. Was my introductory biography fair? Was there anything that you wanted to expand upon from that or maybe was missing?
No, I think you did a good job. If you had not mentioned it, I probably would have mentioned the unorthodox pajamas, just to paint you a visual picture of what I look like right now.
Excellent. And
Also,
the other thing,
wearing my reading glasses to not look at anything. I keep forgetting we're just on a call. I don't need to see my monitor.
excellent. And the other thing that was, as I was doing my research, that seemed to crop up a lot was this love of Jason from Friday the 13th. That seems to have made a big impact and impression on a young Ron Joseph.
Yes, I am a huge Jason Voorhees fan.
So
I wish the makers of the movies were as big a fan as I was, because they don't seem to do him justice lately.
Ron, is it just Friday the 13th, or is it all of the New Line Cinema 80s slasher films?
Well, I grew up watching. I'm an old man. I'm going to be 50 this year. It's pretty much all of them. I'll watch any horror, but Jason is like my spirit animal.
Is that like your dream project to work on something in that franchise professionally?
Yes. Actually, I know you guys have had Chad Bowers on your show recently. Well,
Sure,
maybe
yeah.
not so recently, but he's been on.
Not
He
recently,
and I have
but...
Right, he and I have been kicking around an idea for doing Jason versus Pumpkinhead, because I just think the two franchises, it would write itself. I did some rough sketches and put them online, and they got some pretty good feedback, and he's totally into it. So that's something we'd like to have down the line. It's rough, though, with licensing.
Yeah, at the same time, licensing in this decade makes everything possible. If you had told me, 10 years ago that there would be a co-branded Back to the Future Transformers toy that would just be available at stores, not even San Diego exclusive, and then a 4-issue miniseries, I would not have believed you.
That was I'm right there with you. It's incredible some of the things that are coming out now and things that are happening. If you ever thought that ROM would be crossing over with the Micronauts and the Transformers and G.I. Joe and Mask, it's incredible.
I really enjoyed that universe, the Transformers continuity at IDW, which then expanded to include the rest of the Hasbro properties, and through some luck and also a lot of really good writing and some careful planning, the timeline basically all works out that the Transformers comics that have been running since, I think it's 2006, and the G.I. Joe comics that have been running since, I want to say 2010, actually could fit together in a continuity, and then you liberally sprinkle in the rest of the Hasbro properties. And while the Revolutionaries series that you drew about a third of was being published, I feel like there was just so much content, right? There were there were 3 monthly Transformers books. There was
Right.
this one person from every property team up book that was really a bridge from the previous crossover to the next crossover, which felt very sort of Marvel style in terms of hopping from one event to another. And not all these characters mean much to me, right? I like Mask, and I'll read some Mask comics, but I don't know how excited I'm going to get if a character is changed or if a character, like dies or ascends to godhood. But it makes sense. Like, no, I think there should be a Hasbro verse, and all the writing and all the art in this series was great. Which actually leads me to my second question. If Mark didn't have an opening career question, I wanted to kick things off. Mark, should I ask the first interview question?
Yeah, go on.
Ron, tell us about your earliest published comics works.
Oh my god. There was a very it was probably 1991 or 2. It was a very, very, very small independent publisher on Long Island, in New York. And we were getting paid like $3 a page, $8 a page, doing in-house art, and it was mostly parodies and a lot of porn, a lot. And biographical comics. Yeah. I don't want to talk too much about that because I don't want people to go look for those and possibly find them. My wife found one in a store once, or ordered it on eBay or Amazon or something, and actually presented it to me as a gift one day, and I cringed, but I was also very touched that she went to the length that she did to find it.
I have a close friend who draws for all of the major publishers, who his first paid published comics was an adult comic, and it sort of got published, sort of didn't get published, and he's fine with no one knowing about it.
Yeah, that's me.
So, what was the earliest work that you got that you were bragging about?
That would be the 7% Solution. There's a large gap in my art career, if you want to call it that. So I was trying my hardest Marvel and DC. At the time, Marvel and DC were the almost only game in town when I was in high school, at least. And then Valiant and Defiant and Image started up, and nobody seemed to take any interest in me. So I started to lose a little bit of my motivation and my desire. So I went and I got real jobs, and I'm using air quotes when I say real jobs. So I drove a tractor trailer for like 9 years. I pretended that I was just piloting Optimus Prime to keep myself sane, and then I met my wife, and she was like, "You have to draw. You have to do this. Take some time off," and blah blah blah, and that's what led me to that. I submitted work and I put it up on the internet, and the internet is such an amazing tool. It's just, as we all know. And that's how David Hedgecock from IDW contacted me and asked me to send him work directly from then on. And the 7% Solution came along a few months after that.
Okay, so that was like 2015. So I guess you've experienced a good chunk of your life out of necessarily published comics, because I mean a lot of people's career pathway is they love comics as children, maybe go to art school, out of art school, sort of try and then break into the industry, and different experiences of how easy or not that is, but then sort of find some published work and then sort of just do what you can to sort of stay in the industry and stay drawing in comics, video game design, storyboards, commercial art, whatever opportunities present itself. So I guess for a long period of that time, were you kind of just, did the art always remain quite a big part of your life? Were you sort of just drawing for fun but just not it being your actual, I guess, paid career at that point?
Right. I did for a little while. Once I decided I'm just going to go job hunt, I drew here and there, but it almost became like living with an ex-girlfriend that the relationship ended badly. It was almost painful to be able to draw and not do it for a job. So I put it away for a while, and I didn't do anything for a couple of years.
Mm.
Which, I kick myself for that every now and again, but the path I led me here, so,
Yeah.
Ron,
Excellent. Yeah.
were you a Star Trek fan such that working on a Nicholas Meyer comic was a big deal for you, or did this mean something else in terms of breaking in?
Star Trek. I love the movies. I never watched the show, other than one episode here or there, or clips from episodes. So it didn't have that punch for me. And I actually had to look up when I looked up Nicholas Meyer or Mayer, however he pronounces it.
No, sorry, I got it wrong. You got it right, Nicholas Meyer.
Okay, yeah. Then I realized, the Star Trek connection. And I was like, oh, that's really, really cool. And then I felt like.
And as much as you probably would have liked to draw the covers yourself, those quite a coup to have Kelly Jones doing those covers. What a legend!
That was brilliant. Yes, I grew up reading his Micronauts, and loved it.
Right.
Oh yeah, the new voyages.
Here's a good connection because I see the Bernie Wrightson in your artwork, and so much of Kelly Jones's work is aiming at Bernie Wrightson. In fact, Kelly Jones finished the Frankenstein Alive miniseries that Wrightson didn't finish when he passed.
Yes. Kelly Jones refers to Bernie Wrightson as his captain, and I tell you what, if there was a torch to be passed or a mantle, he's like a legacy. Kelly Jones has got it. He's like, if there was no Wrightson, it would be him. But if there was no Wrightson, I guess he wouldn't draw like that, would he?
So, were you, as a general question, what was your awareness of G.I. Joe before, just as you were about to draw an issue for the first time?
Oh, I mean, growing up in the 80s, it was on, I watched the show. I love the G.I. Joe movie. I had some action figures. I went more down the Transformers path when it came to the collecting the figures and whatnot, but I was pretty well versed in all the Joe stuff. So there was a nice little bit of history there too. And I think maybe I should say what I was going to say for the toy talk.
Did you read the Marvel comic in the 80s and 90s?
Mm-hmm. I even have there was a flashback scene in the Cobras Venom arc that I did that I actually had the original issue where Snake Eyes was watching Quinn as he was about to throw Dr. Venom out of the plane.
Yeah.
So I had that original issue, and now I'm drawing an issue with a flashback referencing that, and I'm like, this is trippy.
How did you buy comics every week, every month? Was it regular, or was it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I had a pull list. I had all of it. Yes.
Where do you get your comics?
There was a place. The first place I found was I was in my early teens. It was called the Incredible Pulp. That was on Long Island in New York, also. And I'll tell you what, on the side of the building, if you drove down the block towards the store, there was a big blank brick wall, and they had this tremendous sign of the Hulk and the Pulp like facing each other, and the Pulp looked like this. I've tried to find if anybody had pictures of it. This big pink, he looked like a walking brain, a pulpy brain. So that was my first comic shop. My old friend Patrick introduced me to it, and then I found a place called Cosmic Comics, not too far away from there, and that was my spot for 10 or 15 years.
Do you know roughly what issue to what issue you read the Marvel G.I. Joe, or what years?
No, that was a long time ago, but I know that it started somewhere. Wow. No, I don't. I know I have Silent Interlude, which is the one that probably everybody has, but I had that back in the day. I didn't collect it regularly. It was sporadic. If the covers looked really cool or the characters, I was like, ooh, let me grab this one. Let me grab that one. Mm-hmm. There was one cover John Byrne did, and I want to say it's Breaker, but it might not be. And I was just fascinated with the cover where he's falling backwards out of a helicopter.
Clutch goes home the hard way.
Clutch. That's the one.
Issue 20,
I used to recreate that. I used to recreate that cover with any other character just because I loved the concept of it. I'm like, that looks so cool and scary.
Excellent. And did you, sort of since then, have you continued to be a sort of fan and collector of comics yourself?
I stopped collecting comics for the most part, because rent and mortgages and car insurance and gas and dating, took over. Um, but I've got like 11 or 13 long boxes of all my books up there. So I was collecting for a while, and then I just had to parse out my spending here and there.
Okay, and who were your art heroes? So I think the obvious one that I can spot is an Alan Davis
Yes,
kind
I
of
love Alan
influence
Davis.
on your work.
Yeah, Alan Davis and John Byrne. John Byrne was my biggest back in the day. He was the first one that I really studied his work and tried to emulate. And then I found Alan Davis, and then what's funny is I learned that they were both heavily influenced by Neil Adams. And once I learned that and I looked at their work, I don't think you'd ever mistake John Byrne for Alan Davis or vice versa. But there are some similarities that I started to pick up. And then I saw Neil Adams. I'm like, oh, there we go. There's the missing piece of the puzzle.
Right, sort of like almost branching off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brian Hitch's very early work was you could see the influence on of Alan Davis on his style before it kind of branched off into his own identifiable style as.
Absolutely, yeah.
as well.
I think I remember the first time I discovered Brian Hitch's work. He was taking over Clandestine.
That's right, yeah.
And I saw his work. I'm like, oh, all right. Alan Davis was going off the book, and I was very depressed about that. But then I saw his. I'm like, oh, I can live with this. I can get into this.
Yeah.
There was I went to a portfolio review a few years ago, and the guy was looking at my work. He goes, oh, somebody likes Brian Hitch. I said, actually, Brian Hitch and I both like Alan Davis. And he chuckled a little, but he looked at me, and almost he didn't like the correction. Not that I was insulted at all that he saw Brian Hitch in my work. It was just one of those, who do you think you are? moments.
Right. Very good.
But of course, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I also noticed in issue 259 in Cobras Venom, there was this panel of an Iron Grenadier with Destro in the background, and I picked it out and I thought that looks very Mignola-esque, and I don't know if you're a fan of his work as well.
I love Mike Mignola's work. I think he's brilliant. I don't draw anything like him. I have to go back and look at that panel now. I thought you were going to pick out a different panel that I totally swiped from Alan Davis from Clandestine. And I didn't know if it was obvious to every. It was a picture of Quinn's face when Dr. Venom shoots him in the back, and he's and I think I took it from Wallop, Uncle Wally from Clandestine. I don't know if you read it.
Okay, no, I've not. I've read some of it, but not in many years.
Now I have to go back and look at the Iron Grenadier picture and see if I subconsciously, or maybe I did swipe it right from Mike Mignola's work. Who knows?
Ron.
Yes.
Ron, how did you get this 5-issue arc on G.I. Joe, and what did you think when you got it?
Oh my God. I don't remember what I did in between that, if that came right after 7% Solution or not, 728. No, that would have been a big gap. It was just a random email. I think it was David Hedgecock that sent it to me. He's like, hey, what are you doing these days? And he said, more importantly, what are you doing for the next 5 months? Because we have a G.I. Joe story and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And I lit up. I'm like, G.I. Joe, holy shit. And here we go with the cursing. I was like, yes, go. I'll take it. I was blown away, and I couldn't email and text and call people enough, my family and friends. Like, I'm drawing G.I. Joe.
I was going to say it was a really fun arc in terms of the story and what you could make of it. There was the giant Dr. Venom robot, lots of intersecting varied storylines, lots of action, lots of different characters. So there's it's not definitely not an issue of people just standing around talking, for example.
Right. Oh my God, I can't stand that talking head dialogue comics where they're just I don't want to draw the same people in the same room for 5 issues. That robot by the way, after David asked me if I wanted to do the arc, he sent me a sketch that Larry Hama had actually drawn. He said, so this is the robot and Larry has drawn. He goes, if you want to do sort of like a tryout for the first cover of the issue, and that cover that they published was the image I sent them. That was based off Larry's design.
I saw. I think Larry might have posted it on Facebook or something like.
Oh, his own
that.
sketch.
Was it? Yes, yeah. Oh. So I have seen that that picture and
Okay.
and yeah, how it's morphed into your version of it.
Right.
Did you get sketches from Larry for the rest of the covers as well, or were those all a blank sheet of paper?
Oh no, no, those were all me. Tom Waltz would maybe the very last cover. I think I didn't really know what was going to happen in the issue. That's another thing when you're working on Joe. You don't quite know. I like to draw something on the cover that's indicative of what's happening inside instead of just doing some pinups and stuff like that. He's like, I don't know. He's like, I don't know yet. I haven't gotten everything. He goes, why don't you just draw this or draw that or try this out? And I did. And I think it was Cover Girl in the desert, the
All Striker or something. No, their Jeep that looks a bit like
Yeah.
an All Striker.
I forget the names of the vehicles all the time, so forgive me if I just blank out. Just interject with the name. It's called a Stinger, you idiot, or whatever. But no, the sketch of the robot was, I think, the only piece of art that I got that was the big Venom robot. Yeah.
Ron, some of the Venoms, some of the Cobras Venom, you penciled and inked. Some of
Right.
it you penciled and Brian Shearer inked.
Right.
How did that work out?
That how did that come about, or
Yeah,
how did I?
yeah.
Oh, I don't know if you read the Pit letters page. I think it was in 257.
Shall I just read that out as I think
Yeah, go for
maybe
it.
background,
Sure, if
and
you
then
want.
and then maybe you can expand and sort of a little bit more,
okay.
Ron. So we go. During the process of illustrating G.I. Joe ARAH 256, our new friend Ron was struck by an unexpected heart malady, so much so it landed him in hospital for emergency open heart surgery. But did that stop Warrior Ron? Heck no. Just check out the pictures of Ron drawing pages in the hospital right until they wheeled him into the operating room. He claims the surgeon prescribed that box of pizza. I have my doubts. That's also Ron in his post-op scars and bandages, clear evidence of his ordeal, ready to get back into the G.I. Joe trenches. And faster than you can scream medic, he did, folks, completing the marvelous work you witness in this fine comic book. And we're not just talking pencils here, we're talking inks too. Oh, and not only did he get it done, he hit the blasted deadline. Talk about soldiering on in the face of adversity. Ron, you the man.
Thank you for the refresh, Mark. In skimming these issues, I did not skim the letters pages in preparation for today's interview. But of course I read issue 280 very carefully.
Yeah. So Ron, how far did you? Was this completely out of the blue? This medical situation, and how far have you got with the process before it all hit?
Okay, so yes, it came out of the blue. There were very small warning signs a few days prior. I'd been having these weird dizzy spells or blackout spells where I would actually collapse or get dizzy and sit, and then it was as if my brain shut off and then turn back on, and I had to reacclimate myself. Like, where am I? What day is this? What was I just doing for a few seconds? It turns out my heart was actually stopping. I had a bad heart valve. Now, just real quick, when I was 17, I had Hodgkin's disease, and I had a tumor in the dead center of my chest, and I had chemo and radiation and all that. It was the radiation treatments that damaged my heart valve. I was very thankful that it was that and not like bacon. That I didn't do that to myself. So I was 16 pages in to the very first issue of the 5-issue story arc. And it was my birthday was in July, and I went into the hospital the day after my birthday. And I remember that we had gone to the movies, and the next day my wife and I and our son were going to go get some Outback. And I pissed and moaned about getting my Outback for a good year after that. I never got my Outback. I took the dog for a walk, and halfway down the block was the worst fainting spell I had. Everything went black. I landed in my neighbor's driveway and sat back up like, what the hell am I sitting in the driveway for? And I had to, again, reacclimate myself. Oddly enough, I finished walking the dog because she hadn't gone to the bathroom yet. So I'm leaning on people's fences, and I'm waiting for this dog to poop.
grief.
I went back in the house, and I went upstairs. My wife was still sleeping. It was early in the morning, and I said, babe, we have to go to the ICU or the the emergency room rather. I gathered up some art stuff and we drove down there. And I didn't know that I was going to be in the ICU. I didn't know what was happening. And they took me right from there and checked me in. They were like, you have to do this and we need this, and he's in 3rd-degree heart block, they were calling it. I told Tom, I had to email Tom from the initial x-ray they did. And I said, I'm going to be laid up for a few hours, so I might just not have a page for you today. And then I had to email him again later, like, yeah, I'm going to be out of commission for a while. And I would draw in the hospital room, take pictures of the sketches of the layouts of the page, which was our standard thing. I would do rough layouts in pencil, scan them, emailed him, and then he'd approve those, and then I'd ink them. So I would take pictures from the hospital room of the pages, and he asked me if I wanted somebody to ink them, and I thought I'd really rather can I just finish this issue? It was such a shitty experience, and I was like, I can't believe this is happening. I just got this 5-issue arc now. So I finished inking issue 1, and then they brought in Brian to do a few because just to help me out because there was recovery and all that. Oh, and a little cherry on the sundae is while I was in the hospital for the heart problem, they did a CAT scan, and they came in my room. They're like, oh, did you know you have a tumor on your kidney?
Oof.
And I looked at my wife, and she looked at me, and she's a nurse. She goes, she's got horror stories, so she and I don't really get rattled. I looked at her, and I shrugged, and I looked at the doctor. I said, well, why don't you just set me on fire at this point? I mean, for crying out loud. Oh, and you have cancer. So October, I had to go in and have another surgery after I'd recovered from this enough. I went in and got the tumor taken out. So this was all during this story arc. So Brian was brought in to help me out. Yeah.
Good grief.
It was quite a run.
Ron, as a reader of comics and as a G.I. Joe fan, I am used to someone, oftentimes the penciler, having a deadline challenge. And sometimes it's not the penciler's fault, right? Sometimes the editor and the writer get them the script late.
Right.
Or sometimes, real world events, right? And there's so many examples in comics of a run being interrupted and other hands, inconsistent hands, lesser hands coming in and finishing the story so that it still ships on time, or maybe not even on time. And as a reader, it's no fun.
Right.
This arc does not suffer for your health challenges, and Brian Shearer has penciled and inked G.I. Joe in addition to inking a lot of G.I. Joe.
Right.
So as a comics reader, as a person interviewing you, I'm glad you're still here and that your ticker is ticking. As
Thank you, I am too.
As a comics person, thank you so much for working so hard to keep the trains running on time and running well.
Thank you.
Charlie Mike.
Oh, well, you had said that it's ticking away. That's funny because I have a metal heart valve now, and it literally ticks, and you can hear it. And I was actually going to take one of my earbuds off. If you want, I'll put it up to it. It might pick it up.
Yes.
Let me see if it'll work. Hold on a second. Watch me short my pacemaker out. I have a pacemaker, too.
Ron is turning into Dr. Venom's robot. Piece by piece.
I don't think it's picking it up. There was, and it's fairly loud. There are nights where we're watching TV and my wife will look over me like, you're ticking really loud tonight. I'm like, I don't know what to do. There's no volume now, babe. Just.
No.
Was there any discussion after these 5 issues of you drawing more G.I. Joe?
Yeah, in a very conversational, hey, and we can do this again. Let's do this again, or let's, there's always there's never a period at the end of the sentence. There's always a comma. It's like, hey, thanks, these issues came out great, or whatever Tom had told me, and I'm sure we'll do it again down the line. Then a few other things I think popped in there, and then this issue 280 had come up. I was like, yeah, good to have it.
Now, I'm curious about the Venom arc, about how the process between you and Brian worked, and it's a very good arc, and the art is very solid, but
Thank you.
without wanting to sort of pour on too much sort of cold water on it, I did, and this is part compliment, part not, possibly, that I did definitely prefer the art where you're inking yourself. I think it might be partly your style in terms of how you do your pencils and inks
Right.
and how much is finished in the inks versus just going over the lines. But I noticed in some of the artwork that you sent over us for 280 in terms of comparing the finished art versus the pencils, that there is definitely a very real difference between the penciled art and the inked art. It isn't just the lines are darker. There is decisions being made in terms of how to complete the piece. I wonder to what extent was the art in that unfinished state almost when it was going over to Brian for him to have to be making those decisions to complete it.
Well, when I'm inking myself, I'm pretty loose with the pencils because I know what I'm going to be doing later. So I'll give Tom and now Megan Brown was another editor I had this last go around. I'll just give them a general idea of what I'm going to do, and they'll approve that, and then I'll go back and then I get in there with all my OCD and details and little nicks and jabs and all the doodads I throw in there. But when I'm gonna have another inker, I'll pretty much do full pencils, and they're pretty tight. I don't even do the thing where they put the X's where it's supposed to be black. I color it in with the pencil, just because there's a thing in my head that I need it to be finished.
Yeah, what I wasn't too sure of, in knowing that story about behind the scenes, what was happening was to what degree when those pencils were going across to Brian, it was always known that would be the arrangement versus him stepping in and helping out, not necessarily with that view that someone else would be inking in mind. Or was it always the case when you were handing something across to Brian, it was known in advance that?
I always knew which ones he was going to ink. And I actually don't remember. Did he ink 2 or 3 of them?
I think it was 3. So in terms of the credits, at any rate, he's got credits for part 2, part 3 is just you, part 4. And part 5. So yeah, it was 2, 4, 5. I think I said.
Well, yeah, that makes sense. That sounds about right. Yes, I remember inking the issue with all of Dr. Venom's flashbacks and So I knew he was going to be inking those. So I pretty much did full pencils, and I wanted to do the covers all myself. So that was a thing. I just wanted to get the covers done myself.
Can you differentiate? What is it like to draw a Larry Hama script versus, say, a John Barber script on Revolutionaries or a Nicholas Meyer script?
Well, wow. So the Nicholas Meyer and John Barber scripts were pretty well fleshed out. There was a lot of detail in there and whatnot. But I communicated with John a lot while we were working on that, on the issues. The Larry Hama scripts are pretty much old Marvel style plot pencil script. So I'll get, and Larry, every time Larry sends a script, it's always got a disclaimer at the top, like these are just suggestions, and if the artist can interpret something different and better, then have at it. It's pretty much a general outline for the page. He's very good with giving the details about the military vehicles and the weaponry. And all the military stuff is very well laid out, and he's good with sending pictures and photos and reference for all the vehicles that aren't G.I. Joe vehicles, because there's a lot of real-world military stuff in the books. That motor scooter that the Baroness is riding in 280, I think he'd sent like eight pictures of that from different angles.
So for Real American Hero, you're getting a plot, not a full script. And Hama is dialoguing over your pencils or inks later.
Yes.
And you find out when it's once it's all been finished what it is these characters were actually saying. Right.
And what's funny is that while I'm drawing it, I'll dialogue it myself in my head while I'm doing it. Like, I'll add dialogue that I think might fit on that page. Like, I wonder what they're blah, blah, blah. And then when I get it back, it's never what I was thinking. Not that it's bad. It's just, boy, I was way off.
What are the circumstances specifically of drawing issue 280, right? We're going to guess that you drew the cover well in advance, but
Yes.
how long did you have to pencil the issue, to ink the issue? Was this affected by the pandemic or all the shipping changes with comics in the last year?
So the pandemic didn't have any impact on my end of it anyway. I know Larry's in Manhattan, and they got hit pretty hard, but I would imagine he just stayed in anyway. I do remember.
When did you start?
I think I had that issue done at the end of the year in. My God, my memory is for shit right now. Give me 1 second.
I might be able to. I might be able to help. I saw I saw from Twitter that you said that you turned in your inks in November, so that was probably the end of the process. And I'm guessing the cover was probably a lot longer than that. So you've got a Baroness here in just I guess would you call it kind of an iconic hero pose, almost sort of against the background of a castle. I'm guessing you had at that point you had no idea what the interiors would actually be.
None, absolutely nothing. And I know that the Baroness is associated with Destro, so I was like, well, what if I put her on top of like Destro's castle, but it doesn't have to be, reference heavy. Like there was nothing specific on the cover that one would think, well, why isn't this in the issue?
I can add a sentence here. There's an interview you did with Bleeding Cool in 2015,
yes,
where you said, I can get several pages of pencils done in a day. Inking, I'm good for a page a day, sometimes a little more. Right. I suspect that number will increase.
Yes, it hasn't. Spoiler alert, it hasn't increased. I'll tell you what, I can ink well and I can ink fast. I can't do both at the same time. And I don't know if you guys pretty much have done your homework. Have you seen anything else I post online when I do like a commission or a pinup and I have time when I can just take my time? And I always find that comes out better than my comic work, and it's frustrating. I've been tempted to go back to just penciling. And I look for inkers. I don't know. I haven't found anybody yet that I really think meshes perfectly with me. Not that anybody's bad. I haven't found my fit yet.
Find out what Mark Farmer's up to, maybe.
Yeah.
What are you laughing at?
Well, there's a lot of the mainstream comics publishers, the sort of style du jour of the last 2 decades is much of it is slick. And looking at the 3 issues of the Cobras Venom that Brian Shearer inked, there is a slickness to it. And when you pencil and ink yourself in those other 2 issues and in Revolutionaries, there's a little grit to it. And I don't know if it's sort of dry brush or if there's a little bit of a grit.
Yes, absolutely, I agree. And it's not intentional, which is frustrating. I'm always looking for that smooth. You know what? I'm looking for that smooth Mark Farmer line, and I don't know if I'm just bad at it or if I'm deadline inking. I use the Pitt brush pens and sometimes just brush ink, and I use the grease pencils. Sometimes when I want to do like smoke, I'll use the grease pencils in the smoke. Yeah, I don't know. I find the grit sometimes unattractive, but I'm a self-deprecating artist, and that's what we do.
Sure. Yeah. Now, I think we're getting close to being in the detail of 280 now, so we can probably switch gears and sort of move into comic talk.
Comic talk, oh, comic talk. Larry Hama writes them, Tim and Mark discuss them, whoa. Comic talk, oh, comic talk. Larry Hama writes them, Tim and Mark discuss them, whoa.
Okay, so today we are talking issue 280, which was released on the 28th of April 2021, which is this year. It's amazing. We're in the future.
Wow, we made it.
We made it. The book credits have the issue as being credited as being February 2021. So, that we're sort of aware that, in the background, IDW gears working, getting these issues out has been some sort of delay. So we have the catch up happening now, and being in the very privileged position of having fortnightly GI Joe, which is amazing.
Oh, is that happening?
Yeah, so we had issue 279 2 weeks ago, and we've got issue 281 in 2 weeks' time, I believe. So,
wow! Oh, I didn't realize they were doing it.
Because there was like 8 weeks with no issues or something.
Yeah.
Wow. I wonder why that was. I wonder if that was pandemic related or something else.
That was definitely catching up from all of the scheduling, both printing and distribution, and I think to a smaller extent, talent.
Yeah. Pencils down and all that.
So the credits for this issue, we have Larry Hama, writer. Artist is credited as Brian Shearer with Ron Joseph, but we now know that can have a line, crossed out through it on your copy at home. It is just Ron Joseph. And as much as we love Brian Shearer, he didn't have anything to do with this issue. Colors, Jay Brown. Letters, Neil Utake. Senior editor, Tom Waltz. Editor, Megan Brown. And research specialist, that's a new title. Congratulations on your promotion, Diana Davis.
Yes.
Let's take a look at the front of these books, and as we always do, judge the book by its cover.
Let's have a look at the covers in the gallery.
So cover A is by some guy called Ron Joseph, and colours by Adam... Oh, I'm going to have to take a run up this. I always struggle. Adam Gazowski, thank you. Yep, we've got Baroness, as discussed, on the battlements of a castle, possibly somewhere in Scotland, holding a sword, a pistol, and with a fur cloak billowing in the breeze. Ron, over to you. Do you want to tell us about the process around expanding on the process, what you've said already about landing on this particular cover?
You know, it was I had already seen one or two covers that had been done. There was one from John Royal, and oh man, I'm horrible. I'm going to forget the name of the guy.
Kieran
he's sitting
McEwen.
on the throne. There we go. I was like, oh, we've already got 2 pinup covers. I'm like, what am I going to do? It was really just like, all right, just like I said before, she's associated with Destro, and I like the idea of the castle, and they're pretty loose with the covers. So I just threw a few rough sketches together and sent them over, and Tom liked them, Megan liked them, and they told me to pick whichever one you want and just run with that. I threw the cloak on there just to break up how do I explain this? When you're not drawing something like the Hulk or a big action thing that can fill the whole page, you've got a woman and it's a slender figure, and I'm like, what am I going to do for the sides here if it's just going to be her? So I was like, I'm going to give her this really cool cloak with a cobra pendant on it. It was really that simple. I needed to fill some space.
Yeah, and I think this is a new invention, right? But it feels very much in keeping with the character.
I guess. I mean, it doesn't look out of place, right?
Yeah, I like the clasp on the shoulder.
Thank you. I wish I was a little better at drawing sexy women. It's not my strong suit. Monsters and whatnot are right up my alley, and ugly things.
Tim, any thoughts on this cover from you?
Yeah. So Guzowski colored the main cover for the previous issue with all of the planes and the Terradrome, and I know that he's done important coloring at IDW on some high-profile projects. I like his coloring on cover B more than his coloring on cover A. I'm a sucker for a bad guy or Batman with a red sky behind them. Since Baroness's armor and all of the castle behind her are just about the same color, and her fur cloak does separate her from the castle, but there's a sameness to a lot of the elements here in the color work that I don't love, but I do like the idea of this cover, and I do like the red background, and I like this sort of aristocratic feeling for Baroness. And also, this does not happen a lot with G.I. Joe, where even though the covers tend not to be directly about what's in the issue, oftentimes we'll get, cover A does have the character or characters from the issue, and then covers B and C are sort of other things. And this is one of those sort of, for IDW, rare occasions where it's a Baroness issue and all 3 covers have the Baroness.
Go figure.
I do like cover B, which is Kieran McKeown. So Baroness is sitting. She's holding a beverage, which might be wine, although perhaps there's sort of a nod to the old Comics Code Authority rules about blood can't be red; it has to be brown or black. Right. This wine is brown, so maybe it's that Pepsi Max that Mark is having this morning, and she's holding a pistol. I like her pose. I really like the 2 Cobra soldiers behind them and how they're knocked back just a little bit with some blue. So there's a little bit of atmosphere between her and them. All of their black lines and all of the black sort of behind them that they disappear into are not a pure black. They're a slightly gray blue black. So I do like this cover. I love seeing original Cobra soldiers, right? As a kid, I sort of wondered what would happen to the Cobra soldiers after '86 when the basic Vipers were introduced. And in the comics, we still see the Cobra soldiers.
Should we move on to the retailer incentive cover? So we've got John Royal, Jagdish Kumar on inks and colours by frequent collaborator James O'Frady. Baroness in the foreground, flanked by 2 female Cobra troopers firing behind her with a Cobra flag on flames in the background. Yeah, great work as is fairly standard for John Royal, but and I think this isn't the first Baroness cover that he's done, but yeah, very nicely done and great colours from Frady.
The toy collectors can correct me here, but there was a 2-pack or 3-pack 4 years ago, which had some Cobra soldiers that were women. Mark, does this ring a bell? I remember seeing it. I know
they exist in some form. I'll have a quick Google while you're talking.
I'll kill some time by filling a sentence. I remember seeing a 2-pack or 3-pack at JoeCon in the Hasbro display, but then I can't follow up and say that it was a general store release or an online only or a fan club release. I love... Oh,
here we go. In 2017, a Cobra Trooper was released in the official G.I. Joe Collectors Club as a 3-pack of female Cobra Troopers.
Thank you. And I think they each have different hair color, right? I think they have helmets, removable helmets.
Yeah, it looks like they've got removable helmets, and one of them has got black hair. One of them has got... looks like maybe brown.
And probably one is blonde.
I'm guessing, yeah, this last one looks blonde or possibly even orange.
James O'Frady's colors on this retailer incentive cover for issue 280 are gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. There's only rendering in the sky behind them. Everything else is a hard edge, right? So it looks more like animation cell painting, which is a really good look for G.I. Joe. The comics and the cartoons are very different things to me, but hard edge cell shading color in comics really pop, particularly since so many comics are colored with a painterly rendered, like 1990s, 2000s style. And this is really bold, right? Big red flag that's basically just one color red with one darker shade, and then these blues with these really gorgeous yellow and orange reflected light highlights on them. Baroness pops forward. The 2 Cobra soldiers have little hints of orange around them. Gorgeous.
Yeah, and there's this great arc of light around Baroness, which is sort of, as you say, making her pop forward.
I love that cover. John Royal's got a very exciting style. Goes in that J. Scott Campbell school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we've got a trio of East Side Comics Snake Eyes variants. So one of them has got trade dress, one of them is has got no logo, and then the third one is a daytime variant. So it's essentially the same image and pose, but in the daytime without the rain of the first one. And these are all by I can't quite make that out.
Kirill Repin or Kirill
Repin, yeah.
Ripon. So here, this pose, this is a redraw of the Phil Gozier Snake Eyes cover to G.I. Joe Special Edition #1. This was the comic that was published after the final Marvel issue, which was the unpublished Todd McFarlane issue from several years earlier. So that cover for G.I. Joe Special Edition 1 had a cover swipe of the Todd McFarlane 1990 Spider-Man #1 cover pose. And so this is now getting redrawn again, and then it's very heavily digitally colored. And I don't understand how it's helpful or fun to have Snake Eyes on a comic that he's not in. And he's decidedly not. Like, this is just a Spotlight Baroness issue. And I don't slight any store that wants to get an exclusive cover to celebrate something special, like an anniversary issue or an anniversary for the store, or to make money, because comic book stores, I know, have a challenge in making money. But I do think that exclusives and variants should make sense. And I like this, I'm looking at a small reproduction of this. I like this image, but I don't understand this image.
I know a lot of the fans of the comics and particularly the variant covers have been going a bit wild for this one. So there's definitely a market for it. We've talked about this before. We're not big fans of the variants and it's just not my bag, baby.
Right.
It's interesting though that it is a swipe of an homage to begin with, and the layout of the image is very is steering very, very closely to the original Phil Gossier image.
Right.
If you look particularly at, for example, the positioning of the knife in Snake Eye's hand, which obviously wasn't there originally in the Spider-Man illustration. It is a very faithful rendition or updating of that image. There we go.
Can I add something? I'm sorry to interrupt. Can I add something to something one of you guys said? I can't critique an artist for putting a character on the cover that isn't in the comic, because back when the Hasbroverse stuff was going on, they did these artist edition covers, and I was asked to do one for Mask, and I had a shot of one of the cars from Mask flying under an underpass in Manhattan, and Grimlock was chasing it.
Right.
And it says in this big exciting blurb, in this issue, Grimlock versus Mask, or Mask versus Grimlock, and at the very bottom it says Grimlock does not actually appear in this issue. So I'm guilty of that as well.
That's a bit of fun though. I like that.
People were a little pissed off. I read some comments on forums. I'm like, yeah, well, what do you got to do?
Yeah. Plot breakdown. What actually happened in this issue? So, following on from the events of issue 34, published in 1985, Wild Weasel and the Baroness crash land their Rattler on the tarmac of Springfield Airport. No sooner has the Baroness been dragged from the burning wreckage by Technovipers than she is taken by Night Raven to Paris. On the outskirts of Paris in Montmartre Abattoir, Baroness meets Major Blood and some topless vipers who are interrogating a prisoner to find out the route of the motorcade carrying the Barovian Prime Minister. Later, Blood attacks the motorcade from the back of a Stinger and is joined by his vipers in an armoured vehicle. The Baroness finds out from Destro that Blood is playing a triple cross to kill the Prime Minister and pin the blame on Cobra, and launches an attack from a heavily armed Vespa scooter, killing the Vipers and putting a stop to Blood's plans. The issue concludes with the Prime Minister indicating that he can work something out with Cobra after all. There we go, another one and done action-packed issue. So what struck me as interesting about this one, having looked at the previous 4, I believe, Untold Tales in this mini arc, most of those kind of could exist in isolation, and you can't quite pin where they're going to happen in the GI Joe history. So it's interesting that this one is kind of more directly linked to an existing issue in terms of that, picking up where issue 34 ended and doing something a little bit closer to what perhaps they were doing with the Hasbro Comic Pack toys, where they released a number of issues which filled in the gaps in between issues. In terms of your process for this one, Ron, that it struck me as possibly there was kind of quite a simplicity to the style, quite an open style. Like a lot of the backgrounds, in terms of the not the colors, but the way that you've drawn it aren't necessarily defined. And I wondered whether that was a throwback, an intentional throwback to maybe it being a sequel to an issue that was released in the 80s where we would see a lot of hard pure color backgrounds as a panel rather than a detailed rendering of every single one, or if that was intentional or not, or if it was a process of just being under deadline pressure that you or just your natural style. Over to you.
Yeah, no, there was definitely a bit of a deadline issue. I got the script a lot later than I thought I was going to, and I had other projects that people had been waiting to get done. So I felt a little bit under the gun. So I had to cut a few corners. No lie, I had to cut a few corners here and there. So you get some panels that I had to rely on the colorist to fill in the background. I mean, make it look pretty for me.
Sure. No, I mean it's not necessarily to the detriment of some of that detail being lost. I was curious as to whether it was intentional.
Yeah, no,
or not. Certainly
very
a lot of my favorite issues from the likes of Wiggum. It would be the panel in the character in the foreground with the rest, the background as a solid color, not necessarily depicting the actual space that they're in, for example.
Right.
Okay, Tim, do you...
Tim's muted. He might be having a pee break.
I'm right here. I'm just listening.
Tim will sort of listen to my idle chitter chatter and then come in with the killer questions that really dig into the insight once my more superficial waffle has been dealt with.
So Ron, does the artwork of Rod Wiggum in issue 34 does it speak to you at all in your approach to this issue, since you draw differently than... So, Mark's question is about sort of backgrounds and an openness or maybe a little less detail. Right. I mean, nowadays when anyone draws a scene that takes place in a 1960s Jack Kirby Marvel comic, they draw a little bit or a lot like Jack Kirby, and it's cute and fun until you realize that certain artists won't get hired to draw modern stories because they only draw quote retro, and it sort of becomes this weird rule. Right. So did you feel any interest or pressure, or were you investigating Rod Wiggum's approach in issue 34, or is it just a matter of continuity, here's how the Rattler's damaged, I'm going to draw it the same?
Well, definitely something like the damage on the Rattler. Before I got the script, I'd actually gotten I think it was like a GI Joe Bible, and it was like 20 issues of Joe from that run. So I had a day or two of reading the PDFs of all the old Joel issues, and especially, of course, the one that I had to follow up. So yes, paying attention to the detail on the Rattler was important. That was gone pretty quick though, and then the rest of it was a new story. But I didn't make a conscious decision to try to emulate any of the original artist's work, and just to do what I do.
Okay, and then the follow-up question is, have you been to Paris, and does this issue, as an artist or as a world traveler or as a tourist, does this present a particular challenge or thrill?
No, I have never been to Paris, except via Google Maps. I went on Google Maps, actually. I started typing in streets and areas that take place in the book, and I picked out photos or shots from Google Maps to see if I could, try to draw those, street scenes or storefronts or whatnot. Especially, I needed reference for the Moulin Rouge.
Was some of so Hama was providing reference for vehicles. Was he also providing any reference for backgrounds, or was that
no,
back to you?
that was all me. And I don't know if I got them all right, but I mean they were all taken from pictures from France, in Paris. So
I suspect that part of the interest for Hama in writing this issue is that he has been to Paris, and one of the things that I like about this issue, this sort of one of my overall points, one of my sort of talking points for this issue, is that this can be a familiar thrill for a few readers who live in or have been to Paris. And I don't know how specifically Hama is tracking a scene from one location to another. It's like you see a movie and someone's in Times Square, and then like the next scene they're like at Ellis Island.
Right.
It's like, no, that would take an hour. But so to the extent that there's still sort of the comic book or storytelling logic of someone changing places conveniently, but also that G.I. Joe is international, and if G.I. Joe itself is mostly American and not too international, then certainly Cobra is international. So as a reader and as a G.I. Joe consumer, oh cool, it's not just a Baroness spotlight issue, it's an issue that takes place in a specific place, and also it takes place in a specific moment in the G.I. Joe continuity, because not only does the opening scene carry on from a previous issue, but Major Blood's final bit of dialogue alludes to another issue upcoming then in 1985.
The rally, right? See you with the rally?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, one of my sort of just reactions reading the issue was that sort of issue 34 continuation, felt somewhat disconnected from the rest of the story. I mean, it, in terms of the plot mechanics, it's not necessarily a requirement of the rest of the story. And I guess definitely hits nostalgia feels in terms of that issue was in most G.I. Joe fans' top 5 issue. Some people it's their all-time favorite issue. So I can understand the desire to revisit it. And I don't know how I necessarily completely feel about it. Whether I would have liked just the main rest of the story to continue, or that sequence is fun, but it's somewhat disconnected. And I want could have potentially there have been a thinking of it's almost like a James Bond style framing device where you get a little nugget of the previous adventure finishing before you launch into another, Indiana Jones or James Bond kind of, you often have that kind of extended opening sequence, which doesn't necessarily relate to the main body of the rest of the movie.
Well, the thing about the James Bond, like if you were watching a movie, the whole plane landing scene would have been like a pre-credit scene, maybe takes 5 to 7 minutes, and then you still have maybe a 2-hour movie. This is a 20-page comic. I don't know if I necessarily would have spent 5 or 6 pages landing the plane, and then getting into the next story, which was we went from a dogfight in the sky to a car chase through France, and even though the issues came out decades apart from each other in Baroness's timeline, it's like the next day. It's like I just got off the plane, and now I'm racing through the streets. I might have had this story start with her waking up in an infirmary or something after the crash, and then recap the crash in a page. That's just me.
I've been thinking about this since I read the comic. I really like the first 5 pages, and I really like the next 15 pages or 14 pages minus the sort of transition page. I don't think it is as effective to push these two stories together. But I appreciate the attempt. One of the things that strikes me about the Larry Hama G.I. Joe comics is that he is occasionally experimenting. I think in a way that a lot of comics writers don't. Silent Interlude, SFX, the Wordless Story in Yearbook 3, Diptych, Triptych, which is, 125, 126, or 124, 125. And 250 was silent, right? Issues with, a single character, issues where it's sort of a new Joe and some bystanders. If this was like an X-Men comic or a Batman comic, I might feel cynical about this. Like, oh, the writer is trying to latch on to some nostalgia, or the publisher's trying to goose some sales of a collection of an older story. What I think I see here is a writer sort of casting about for a motivating event which may not connect, because sometimes the mission just it's like, I just finished a mission, right? And I think Hama has been interested in subtle and in overt ways referring to the Marvel continuity. I think because readers are asking him to. I think because sometimes it's easier to just sort of treat the second half of this series, the IDW run, as its own thing, even though it still connects with the Marvel run. I think in this case, linking these two stories wasn't Hama's most successful bit of writing, but I appreciate the attempt, because I really like everything about the dialogue. I like the sort of sense of honor and duty with the crash. Mark knows this, I love that the Techno Vipers show up and do a Techno Viper thing. And I really like, when you turn the page, right, after the three Techno Vipers rescue the Baroness and Wild Weasel, you turn the page and there's a splash. And this is the only splash in the whole issue. And a lot of the Marvel run, either page 1 was a splash, or later on, a lot of times pages 2 and 3 were a splash with the title and credits. And IDW, for whatever reason, doesn't have the credits in the comic. I mean, we can guess the reasons. It's not a mystery. And IDW issues don't have titles. And what this page does is slows you down. Because in the language of comics, more panels per page, it's like in film, faster edits, faster cuts, right? It picks up the pace. And when you hit a full page, you're supposed to slow down, particularly if you turn the page, right? So I love this sense of relief that the body language in Wild Weasel and Baroness, right? She's got her hand on her neck. He's got his hand on his forehead. He's got his helmet. They're leaning against an emergency vehicle. And then all of a sudden, it's like, no, you have to go halfway around the world right now.
It's an interesting observation, Tim, because often, particularly if thinking about like 90s image books or whatever, the splash page is often the climactic bit of action. It's the big action sequence of the hero, maybe the team all jumping together, showing it off. And here we've got the splash being a quiet moment of a moment of breathing out and following that traumatic crash. It's a kind of different approach to a splash than maybe you would typically see. So interesting choice. Ron,
Yes.
One of the things I notice about this particular page is I think this is the first time we've ever seen Wild Weasel helmetless.
Right.
So obviously you've made some design choices there about what you think Wild Weasel might look like.
Or Ron, are you realizing right now that you're the first person to draw this and it wasn't a big deal?
I did not know that. I had no idea that he had never been drawn without his helmet before. And here's I didn't know if there was one Wild Weasel and then the other people with the same uniform that weren't codenamed. I mean, Wild Weasel. I wondered if there were just, there were the Cobras troopers and they all looked the same. Like, I didn't know if there was one that stood out among the other ones. So Wild Weasel didn't know quite if it was just a title or one character's name, because there are other Rattlers. Who flies the other one?
Sure.
Right?
You are taking us back in time to 1984 when many of us wondered this too, and the comic book and the TV show answered these questions for us.
Well, I don't have these answers.
The prevailing wisdom is that we have one Wild Weasel who is a character, and then many Rattler pilots who potentially are wearing the same uniform.
Okay. Well, then, to quote Unicron, it pleases me to be the first.
For our listeners, this is Ron's second Transformers the movie reference. He made his first one before we pressed the record button.
Back when I was being an old man techie here. Was there another part of the question that I forgot to answer?
I was asking how you landed on the look of Wild Weasel. If what sort of thoughts you had into that?
Well, I definitely wanted to go with, some sort of cropped hair, not quite military style hairdo. I mean, he's, so I went with, because I didn't know the significance, I didn't know how generic or unique to make him look. And I think I was probably reading some, looking at other stuff or pictures of military people. I'm always referencing photos and whatnot, and catch a look from somebody in a photo. I'm like, I kind of like that. He looks, like a weary pilot that just had a huge dogfight. I'm like, I'm gonna go with this.
Yeah.
This is the interview answer that launches 1,000 action figure customs. Now everyone knows how to sculpt a head or to find a head for their Wild Weasel figure without a helmet. Everyone, go!
I was going to say, I think your comment now, you reminded me. Was it that Tom Waltz posted a picture of a military man?
Yes, it was Tom posted a picture of himself from his military days, and I looked at it and I found it and I sent it back to him. Like, hey, can I use this? And he's like, oh, absolutely, go ahead. And I think that was for. And I made a tweet about it as well. It might have been the Military Appreciation Day or Veterans Day, or there was a specific thing going on, and I wanted to honor him with that. He's saying he loved it, so he was like, "Yeah, go ahead, have fun." But it was Larry Hama that actually called for Wild Weasel to have his helmet off in the script.
Right.
It wasn't something I just decided to do.
Yeah, I mean, with the broken visor as well, it makes sense that you're not gonna, and obviously it wouldn't be comfortable and stuff. So
I would imagine,
it makes sense for it.
Right, just jumping out of a burning airplane, you'd want to get your helmet off because it's probably stifling.
And what was interesting about this sequence, this opening sequence, and potentially how it's echoed in the rest of the story, was that here you have the Techno Vipers marching in to save Baroness and Wild Weasel, sort of working their way through the flames, risking life and limb just before the plane explodes. No worries, Baroness. Techno Vipers are on the job. And then the following page, Baroness is reflecting, another few seconds, we would have been incinerated. Wild Weasel saying, those Techno Vipers risked everything to get us out of there. And often the Cobras are being portrayed as somewhat cowardly or very selfish or something. So it's interesting that, these Techno Vipers, they're not following that typical trend of characterization. They are being portrayed almost as heroes in this, from this framing view of,
this picks up a thematic thread from Shakedown from issue 34, in that Wild Weasel has respect for his whatever it is, for his opponent, for in this case his subordinate. And I think even in sort of the villainy of Cobra, a pilot is going to appreciate the ground crew,
right?
But it's Mark's right. It's great to read it, and then sort of as this sort of motivating bit of irony, Baroness can then say she's agreeing. We all deserve some R&R after that. And then Deathstroke interrupts her and says, "Gotta go to Paris."
There should be an issue. There should be a small issue of Wild Weasel just relaxing and having cocktails and watching TV and whatnot. Well, what's Baroness doing? Meanwhile,
I would very much like to read an additional, maybe. Okay, so we've got a 4 or 5 issue arc coming up. There's probably going to be like a 3 issue arc after that. Maybe for 2022, we can have 4 or 5 or 6 self-contained issues. I'd love it if Hama writes a single issue with Wild Weasel. Maybe it could pick up from the end of this scene. Maybe you can draw it. Maybe Wild Weasel has his helmet. Maybe not.
Maybe not. I'd love to see him sitting in his house with his pajamas and a bathrobe on with the helmet on. And maybe a straw sticking through the thing so he can sip Pepsi Max.
And he's wearing a onesie, but the onesie has the Rattler pilot design on it.
I could use myself as reference, so that would be easy.
The next page after this one, ironically, has a Stratoviper as the pilot to take Baroness to Paris, and the Stratovipers are normally portrayed as the asshole of the Cobra Legion, who really don't get on with the ground crew to the extent that the ground crew sabotaged their ejector seat levers and can't let them escape.
I do like to touch on something you said before about you like that there was a respect or a bit of a nobility, not only Wild Weasel, but just for the Techno Vipers as well. And I enjoy that when villains are portrayed, even if they're assholes and they're villains, and they want to do bad things. I like when there's a respect, or when there's, like you said, like a nobility, or some sort of code of ethics or morals. And like Larry did that with Dr. Mindbender back in the Cobras Venom arc. And I really appreciated that. That was one of my favorite little bits, was that my Dr. Mindbender not only did the right thing, but then he went and sent that prosthetic leg.
That's right.
Absolutely. I love that.
This bit with Wild Weasel and the Baroness is also an important contrast within issue 280, because we like the Baroness and we end up really liking Wild Weasel, right? So, and these Techno Vipers, like, okay, Cobra's doing its job, Cobra gets along with Cobra. This sets up a contrast with Major Blood being a slimy worm later in the issue, and these three Vipers who may not really be Vipers, but are sort of mercenaries that Blood has hired, is the implication. So again, I think, in terms of, I feel like rereading this, in 6 months or a year, I'll like this issue more, even if it still feels like linking a sort of a new story set back then with an old story that we all love so much wasn't successful. I think there's still things about this issue that work really well. Something that's really unusual about this issue is that there are no Joes. And this has happened a few times in G.I. Joe, but it almost never happens. We've certainly had issues of Special Missions, the spin-off series, where there's no Cobra. But in this issue, the sort of main faction we think about, G.I. Joe, is not here, not even on the covers. And then we just have Cobra, but we have these two factions of Cobra. We have sort of normal, like, good, bad Cobra. And then we have, like, unusual bad Cobra, right? Major Blood. And then we also have this sort of third faction, which is the Barovian, is it Ambassador?
Yeah, yes.
Prime Minister, I think.
Prime Minister.
So an unusual issue in lots of ways, right? We don't have that many self-contained issues in G.I. Joe. We have very few issues with just the villains. What's worse than the villain, right? Like this is as a writer, and Hama referred to this in that opening arc he wrote of G.I. Joe Origins, which was the sort of not Marvel continuity, but the sort of main IDW, like what a lot of people call the Chuck Dixon continuity. So Hama wrote the opening arc of G.I. Joe Origins, where it's like, what's worse than Cobra, right? Who's the villain in that G.I. Joe universe who's worse than Cobra? So as a writer challenge for anyone who's listening, when you write a story and you have your villain, right? It's like, what's worse than, in the animated series, right? What's worse than Cobra Commander? Serpentor. What's worse than Serpentor? Cobra Law, right? What's worse than Megatron? Unicron, right?
As a reader, do you guys appreciate that, like an all Cobra issue with no Joes in it, or is that one of those? Geez, I want Joes in my G.I. Joe. I just wonder.
It's awesome.
As long as the story's interesting, and then it's fine for me.
Yeah, it's awesome. This comic has gone for so long and has had so many hands involved. I'm always ready for an unusual or an experimental issue. And like I said before, I appreciate the attempt, even if the experiment doesn't click the same way that a quote normal issue would.
Okay.
Because you're not going to get an issue like this of Uncanny X-Men. Like there's just not going to be an issue which is about like Magneto. I mean, right now in X-Men, Magneto is one of the good guys, and he lives with the X-Men on their island. But in the 90s, you're just not going to get an entire issue where Magneto is dealing with some other evil mutant, right?
True, very true.
And sort of one of my main points that I like to make over and over to either lapsed G.I. Joe readers or grumpy G.I. Joe readers, right, is that this comic is unlike every other comic book, right? Not just because it's like gone for so long or because the same person's written it or because it's based on a toy, but in terms of how it's written, right? Like you're certainly never going to have an issue of like, okay, let's say not something highfalutin like X-Men, but something sort of ground level like the Punisher, right? No one's going to write an issue of Punisher, 80s, 90s, 2021, where he's in France and someone pulls out what is this, the tap 10? What is this? This
Vespa 150 tap.
Thank you. This, you know, like this comic is unusual because it's got good guys and bad guys in very specific costumes. It's got vehicles which are characters as much as the humans, and yet it's sort of real world and where it can be, places. But then there are these. Anyway, this is my very general, like, this comic's great. Everyone should read this comic. But let's get back to talking specifically about 280.
Okay, very good. So that theme of the noble cobras kind of continues on into the second part of the story, where we don't have the GI Joes being in the heroic role, but we've then got the Baroness in that role, sort of, I guess, initially sort of expressing her disgust at the Major Blood's treatment of his prisoner and sort of ultimate execution, and then following sort of that, trying to thwart his triple cross. So that theme sort of does sort of continue through. Major Blood does sort of have an element of his character at one point where it looks like he's on the back of the Stinger doing some poetry. I'm not entirely sure if I've quite got the pentameter of this poem right in my brain, or how it works. I feel like I'm missing something, possibly. When you're riding on a Stinger and you have an itchy trigger finger, do not sneeze or twitch, for this'll prematurely launch a missile. Is the idea there that there should be something that rhymes, or is it just that he's a bad poet?
I'm going to guess both.
What's the missing word? When you're riding on a Stinger, you have an itchy trigger finger, do not sneeze or twitch, for this'll...
Well, sometimes there's a joke in popular culture where you set up a bad word, where you set up a bad word and then you surprise your audience by cutting left and not saying the bad word.
But what is the bad word?
I don't know, and I'm not sure that this is a puzzle. I think it's enough that it's a bad poem and he breaks his rhyming scheme.
And so he's on the back of this Stinger Jeep, which is one of my favorites and doesn't necessarily always get a lot of panel time. And he's shooting a missile from the back, and it looks like, Blood is the controller almost of this missile. I'd always sort of interpreted it as being controlled by the driver on the interior of the vehicle, but
if I remember correctly, Blood was supposed to be in the Stinger.
Okay.
But I was looking at it, and I think, and then there was the scene where there was something that had to happen. I'm like, well, if he's inside, I don't know how well this is going to work. So I just put him on the outside, and they were okay with it. They didn't complain.
Okay.
And I kind of like the idea of him being like a mad Captain Ahab, and she's Moby Dick, and he's, let's get her,
And then we've got an almost like sort of in the 80s feel to this book. We do have a busload or carload of nuns who are put in jeopardy, which feels like a part of something that you might see in an action movie in the time. We've got Baroness coming to the rescue in a Vespa 150 Tap, which is described by one of the Vipers. I think he says, "Is that a 150 Tap? I saw one in Les Invalides at the Para exhibit." I wonder if Larry Hama has also been to this Para exhibit. So what is this? It's an anti-tank scooter made in the 1950s from a Vespa scooter for use with French paratroops, and was introduced in 1956. Modifications from the civilian Vespa included a reinforced frame and a 3-inch recoilless rifle mounted to the scooter. The scooters would be parachute dropped in pairs, accompanied by a 2-man team. The gun was carried on one scooter while the ammunition was loaded on the other. The recoilless rifle was never designed to be fired from the scooter. The gun was mounted on an M1917 Browning machine gun tripod, which was also carried by the scooter before being fired. However, in an emergency, it could be fired while in the frame and while the scooter was moving, which indeed is what happens here when we have this sort of armored carrier that is exploded from armament being launched from the Vesper. And when I first read this issue, I was like, what on earth is this? But I did have confidence that that it would be based in some sort of reality. And when I did the research, indeed, this was a thing that existed that I was not aware of. And where else but in a Larry Hama book would you be learning about armaments like this?
When I read the scene where the Baroness fires her 75mm shell from the front cannon, I thought, wait a minute, that would push her back. It would punch the Vespa back, and she'd flip off the front. This should have a recoil. And then I thought, no, I bet Hama researched this, if not wrote one day a long time ago. This must not have recoil. And then Mark sent over that tiny bit of research, and it is indeed recoilless.
Wow. You had mentioned the Expo. All the reference that Larry sent me from the Vespa was clearly from some type of show or an exhibit.
I also wonder if that exhibit. So factually, that exhibit may have been running in 1985 when this story sort of ostensibly takes place. Although, like any story where characters don't age, but it's published for 30 years. When does it take place? It takes place now. But I also wondered if what's embedded here is a story of the Baroness's ingenuity in either having one already in a safe house or borrowing one from some agent in Paris or stealing one from some other collector or warehouse.
Or potentially this public exhibit with a kind of the, historical, scooter being on display to the public.
Right.
And this vehicle that explodes. So we've got a blue vehicle, like an armored personnel carrier type vehicle. Ron, do you remember from the script what this thing actually is? Because I don't think it's based on a G.I. Joe toy.
No, I think it is. Because I had gone online and found photos of it. Let me see if I'm going to go in my Joe folder really quick.
Okay.
I may have the pictures of the toy, and I can give you the name.
Ooh, music to my ears.
Oh.
Ron's Joe folder.
I feel like a kid that hasn't done his homework. Where am I?
What percentage of your time would you say, Tim, you spend navigating through Joe folders?
Oh man, I'm staring at paper folders. My hand is on my computer where I have dozens and dozens of digital folders. I'd say 99% of my day, if I'm not eating or sleeping.
I've got the script here. I'm gonna. What page did that thing pop up on? Do you remember? Might be like 13 or 14.
13.
13, okay, very good. I'm on 11, 12,
Yeah,
13. You know what? Just as the Cobra APC.
Okay.
It's got the Cobra sigil on. But yeah, the Cobra APC comes screeching around a corner and joins the chase behind the limo. Make sure the Cobra sigil is on the front. But I've seen, I think I probably have a reference for it here too. An actual photo. I don't know if I should send it to you if I'm allowed to or not though.
Mark, are you and I revealing our ignorance of some of the later, like 2005, 2010 toys by not recognizing this?
I'm not sure. I'm seeing some photos. I think this is what I'm seeing is like a.
See, if you type in Cobra APC on Google, it comes up with some tanks and Humvee-looking vehicles, but not the one that I had in my.
I think I've found the one that you've got. G.I. Joe and Cobra 3D his tank designs. So I think this is. I think this might be a fan.
Oh, here we go. Yeah, I have it. Oh, yeah, it says right here, G.I. Joe Cobra, APC custom loose G.I. Joe Cobra, 1983 vintage is up on Pinterest. I found some.
Yeah. I can see the reference that you would have been using, but yeah, I think it's a fan designed vehicle.
Really? This one's slightly different than the one I had used, but it's basically the same thing. Oh, I'm gonna send you the thing I used. I just found if you want it.
Yeah, cool. Please.
Cool.
Okay, so that blue APC is based on the Cobra APC that you found the reference for on online. Yeah, interesting. I mean, Yeah, there is, because we've got sort of various GI Joe APCs, but less sort of the direct equivalents probably in the Cobra Armory. So just like we see kind of an invented Cobra troop transport for the chopper, which in the Aspid, kind of got a similar process happening here, I guess, for the ground based APC.
If this needed to be an existing G.I. Joe Cobra vehicle, I'm guessing it would be the Rage, which isn't the Rage sort of an urban tank, like urban classification?
Yeah. I don't know how many people fit in it, but it's a bit bigger and clunkier. Also, this feels like a proper urban.
Yeah, that's true. Also, the Rage is pretty wide, and I assume all these narrow French streets are very, very narrow.
The kind of other observation we had more about the story and the character was that Major Blood's attitude to Baroness is a bit strange in terms of the keeping of what was happening at that particular era. He sort of acts like he's somehow untouchable by Cobra Commander, and I didn't quite get that plot point, because I thought at this point in time Cobra Commander had not long locked him up and generally had a dislike for him, and Baroness and Major Blood were kind of firm friends at this this parallel point, and they were plotting together to assassinate Cobra Commander at the rally. So it does seem a little bit strange that they've had this whole this whole tete-a-tete. Good expression, keeping in with the French theme. In the streets of Paris, and launching missiles at one another, and then before jetting back to Springfield and being best buds again.
Right.
Yeah, not a lot you could do about that, Ron. But
no, really nothing.
In terms of keeping with continuity, it sort of seems a little bit like a slight misstep.
Yeah, I'd seen that brought up on a discussion forum. I couldn't really add anything to that discussion. It was just one of those things that I was like, I don't know why I can't do anything about that.
There was a little bit of an interesting discussion there that was prompted by the letters page, where someone had the gall to write in and say to Larry that what was the expression, that that they let him get away with another silent issue, which seemed like it touched a nerve with Larry, despite the rest of the letter actually being pretty complimentary. I think it was a bit of a tongue in cheek comment from the letter writer, but wasn't potentially received that way.
I think I lightly disagree. I think Hama has a efficient and matter-of-fact way of answering questions, and like writing an email and like answering questions at conventions. And I don't think he's swatting this down. I think he's just stating it plainly. I think if he was sitting in front of you, he'd say, "Oh, nobody let me get away with another silent issue. I did that on my own." I don't think it's meant to like, "Nobody let me get away." I think it's not that.
Okay, yeah. Because I don't think there's necessarily really any criticism implied by the letter writer.
Right.
He does open it up with a question at the end, though, whether he should do another silent issue ever again. What do other readers think? And certainly we've had a pinnacle in terms of issue 21 and the yearbook that he did, which was that yearbook 3 potentially, was also very good. We had SFX, which was I think in the 80s, the 80s, which was again another high point of the run, where that was just purely sound effects and no dialogue. Since then, potentially diminishing returns. I don't know that any of the silent issues has been bad, but I think it's a road well traveled, and it's not something necessarily that I'd be holding my breath for Larry to revisit, unless there was a particularly strong idea that he had which would fit it.
I'll answer a little differently. Okay. I would love another silent issue. It has to be with the right artist, because this kind of visual storytelling is a particular challenge. And if you want an example of where it doesn't always work. Was it in 2001, 2002 that Marvel published an entire month of wordless comics, and it was called Nuff Said. And most of those just read like issues where someone wrote a comic and then someone else drew it, and then they turned off the lettering layer. Like a lot of it was not wonderful sort of spatial choreography and visual storytelling. It was just like, well, there's no dialogue or sound effects. I would love to see a wordless issue of G.I. Joe that, with the right artist, does something a little different. So like not necessarily a ninja issue, and now that we've had 275, like a big splash page action issue, something smaller. Maybe an all Cobra silent issue. But I think I sort of any of Hama's questions in the letters page in the last 5 years, where he says he leaves it open for readers to chime in, like, oh, would you want to see this? My answer is always yes. It's like, oh, do you want to see like more obscure characters like Crystal Ball and Repeater? Yes. You want a silent issue? Yes.
Yeah. Do you want Untold Tales? Yeah.
Yeah. Should we do some self-contained issues? Do you want some flashbacks? Should I invent a new character? Should I tell Shooter's story? This sort of existent Joe that started out as an inside joke. Yes. The answer is always yes. Should we go bi-weekly again? That's my question. Yes.
Very good. Okay, let's move on to I Spy. So the little Easter eggs and nuggets of detail that we might have picked out that haven't been discussed so far.
I spy with my little eye.
So we discussed this a little bit, but I Spy a Techno Viper. But issue 34 was from April 1985. Techno Viper released in 87. Similarly, the Viper in 86, and also Strato Vipers a little bit later as well. So some people may be less happy with the chronology of this, where you see one of these Legion that appearing in an event prior to their release in the toy scheduling. It doesn't really bother me. I do quite like the idea that, over time the Cobra Legion is evolving and expanding, and they're adding in all of these different new specialities, whereas they started with almost just, goons in masks and maybe a blue outfit. But an observation. Tim, what do you think of that?
I would prefer an issue that takes place in the original 85, not have post-85 characters. But this has already happened. This happened in issue 144, which is from about 1993.
This is the Snake Eyes Charlie Mike flashback, right?
Yeah, so it's a flashback to sort of pre-issue 1, and there are, I forget what kind of specialized Vipers in it, but it's not basic Cobra soldiers, and I don't know if that was an art decision or a story decision, but we've had this sort of, also similarly, part of why I think it's okay is that The Simpsons does it. Right? Like every 10 years, every 5 years, there's some episode of The Simpsons which will have some flashback to how Homer and Marge met. And the first time they did that episode was on in, I don't know, 93, 96. And so the flashback is to the 80s. And now if they do that flashback, they're going to have cell phones and the internet in the flashback because it's going to be like 2010. So that's fine.
Right.
My I Spy is lots of sound effects. This issue has a ton of sound effects, and it starts on page 3 with the landing gear failing. Oh, it starts on page 2 with the flaps. Right, I'm not sure if that's flink or funk. Probably a flink, which is this wonderful age-old composite you get when you put a capital U. When you put a capital L next to a capital I, sometimes you get a U. But flink, gurn. Boom, awooga. I love the sound effects, right? The blam when Major Blood shoots his prisoner in the head, which is upsetting. But, sound effects have fallen out of favor in comics, which I think is stupid because they are a unique attribute in the language of comics, and you should use all the tools in your toolkit. And they fell out of favor because some people decided that they made comics look like kiddie and juvenile, and like serious comics like Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns don't have them. But sound effects are a way to create audio in a medium that doesn't have them. And absolutely, the sound of a missile launching, whoosh, should have a punctuation, and it should be a different one than a van full of nuns getting hit by a cop car that's flipped through the air, right? Like, why not use every tool in your toolkit? This issue, this is not a scientific comparison, but this issue has, I think, a lot more sound effects than recent issues.
I love the sound.
And I
Go ahead.
Sorry, I love them all, and good job to Neil Yotake for all these great fonts. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I was just going to add to. I'm a big fan of the sound effects too. Every now and again, I think some of them were a little so big. The words were so big that it became the panel. There was that one panel near the end where the stinger gets blown up, and I think the word covered up most of what was happening behind it. I think Major Blood flying through the explosion gets covered by the letters, I think. I do like the one where the plane explodes and the Vipers are running away, though. That was one of my favorites.
I do like when sound effects, if they're too big, a solution is to make them transparent or partially transparent.
That's what happens with the Techno Viper explosion. You can see.
That one looked great
right through the letters.
Right, but not what happens with the stinger getting blown up on the second to last page. I have an I Spy, which I was going to ask Ron, but now I realize this may be a question for Neil Yotake, the letterer. This limousine that is driving this Barovian VIP. The limousine license plate is 616YC1989. 616 in comics often refers to the, quote, regular Marvel Universe. And then there's 2 letters, and then there's 4 digits, which looks like the year 1989. But I wonder if, I'm guessing this is not in Larry Hama's plot. I'm guessing since it's in type, this is not in Ron's original art. I wonder if it has any meaning. I also spy a fancy tattoo on these 3 villainous mercenaries that are pretending to be Vipers that Major Blood has hired. And Baroness refers to it. And I can imagine in the plot, it sort of calls out for the artist, for Ron, something like, like we can see a tattoo on the Viper's forearm and maybe a picture of it or not. But one of those things where it's like, we can't be seeing him from behind. We have to see him either from the front or from the side so that we can see his arm. And he has to not have his glove on, right? Actually, that must be the whole... In the scene, these 4 Vipers, I guess it's 5, are torturing this informant, and they have their Viper shirt jacket vests off, which initially I thought, it's because they're beating up this guy, and maybe you take your shirt off if you're going to get sweat or blood on you, but maybe actually the reason is so that there's already an excuse for a Viper to have his glove off so we can see his tattoo.
Ron, do you remember where this tattoo came from?
Yes, that is another military. That might have been a what were they called? They were not the Foreign Legion. They were here we go. What is it? Larry actually sent me pictures of the tattoos. These are real things. There were a few of them. They're ex-military or mercenary style tattoos. Oh yeah, you know what? One of the pictures Larry sent me was a soldier with 2 teardrops on his cheek and the word Legion over his eyebrow. So I think these guys were, assembled mercenaries from different military factions that got this particular tattoo, or any number of tattoos that he sent me.
Was there any little Easter eggs or sort of things in the detail of this one that you wanted to call out, Ron, that we've not talked about so far?
Honestly, I don't think there are. I didn't really have any opportunities to stick any in there that I would have thought were clever enough, or, hey, look at that, because I do love to do things like that, put little hidden things or characters or people in places. I just don't think I had the room to do that in this issue.
Okay.
I'd like just to reference an older one, like in the IDW, in the 7% solution, Dr. Freud's office is littered. I mean, littered to the point where I thought I was going to get in trouble with all sorts of the Herculoids and Jason Voorhees masks and ROM stuff. I mean, if you go back now and look at Baron Karza is in there, just statuettes and things on his walls. But I didn't really get the chance to do that in this one.
Well, you gotta, you're drawing a non-licensed property miniseries, and you got to audition for the licensed property job that you want, right? So I want to draw ROM and Micronauts. My other I Spy mark is, I guess I have two. One is that not only do we see a Cobra Stinger, we see it use all 4 of its missiles.
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, this issue has a lot of foreign language. It has a lot of expressions in other languages.
Yes.
So these Bloods mercenaries, they insult the Baroness and they call her toilet scum in French. Mm-hmm. And the Barovian VIP and his assistant or bodyguard, also in the limo with him, they use a couple Polish phrases, which is, it's like Barovian doesn't exist as a language, so let's borrow, the country that either it sort of is or that it would be next to in the fictional G.I. Joe map of Europe.
Which they also do for Darklonia as well. I think has a basis in Polish.
Right, thank you.
It was one of my notes was there is a lot of foreign language. You will often in comic books you'll have the shorthand of those triangular brackets to denote that people are talking in a foreign language. And we often don't have to try and figure out what the words are ourselves. But here where there is a lot, we've got. I'll do a run through of some of it. Some of the ones that particularly stuck out for me. Racleur de bidet means bidet scum. The English equivalent perhaps being douchebag. We had Légion étrangère, French Foreign Legion, the military branch of the French army established in 1831. And actually in Blood's file card, it states that he had previously been in the French Foreign Legion. So I guess a throwback to how he knows these particular mercenaries. We had Je suis trop vénère. I am really angry. Vénère is a Verlan word, meaning it's formed by inverting the syllables from another word. So vénère is Verlan for énerve, meaning irritated, angry, or even pissed off. So, je suis trop pissed off. We had un boudin, a sausage made of fat, blood, and meat that smells. So in slang, boudin is often used to mean an ugly girl, which I think most of us would say. The Baroness is not. She should be put on a pedestal. So there we go. Lots and lots of foreign lingo going on.
Error detected. Error detected. No prize incoming.
Error detected. The main one I noticed was that we've got this continuation of issue 34. And then the conclusion is that Blood says to Baroness, "Until we meet again at the rally in Springfield then." But issue 33 was the rally. And then after this point, Blood and Baroness were, worrying about this. So at this point, so before 33, Blood and Baroness were in cahoots planning about the rally. Post 33, they were worrying about the aftermath and this inquest that eventually happens. So my no prize for this is that the publication dates for the issues around about issue 34 were delayed and all over the place with fill-in issues and things. And actually, I looked online on Comic Art Founds and found a page from issue 34 where the issue number seems to be crossed out and then replaced with 34. So I don't believe that issue 34 was originally intended to take place after 33. I think they switched things around. So this is probably a continuation of that original intent of publication order. Because, the rally sequence that was in 33 picked up with a one-page insert in issue 35 where Blood and Baroness bump into Zartan. but then actually isn't picked up again as a plot point until 38. So yeah, lots of movement of when publication of when things were produced and when they were meant to come out, which maybe is intentional, or maybe is Larry remembering when events were supposed to happen in his original plan.
That's some good GI journalism. Some good archaeology there, Mark.
GI journalism, love it.
And thanks to all of the fans and collectors out there of original art who share images of their pages and covers on sites like Comic Art Fans. My only error detected was that panel with the tattoo on the Viper. Baroness doesn't have her Cobra symbol on her breastplate, which she does 2 panels earlier, and I'm going to no prize this as a trick of the light, because they're in a warehouse with fluorescent lights in the ceiling.
That's all on me. I'm going to own up to that one. That's me. I didn't put it on there. Jeez.
And we've talked a bit about this before, about the artist's approach to the Cobra symbol, and it looks like Ron, you've used a couple of different approaches where some of them are hand drawn, particularly on the outfits, whereas I can see, for example, on that tanker on page, is it 1, 2, 3, 4, on page 4, where the Techno Vipers have got their water hoses connected to, that looks a little bit perfect. So I'm imagining that maybe that one is digital.
On a flat surface, or even on the front of the Cobra APC, I'll use I have a vector file here that I'll use and shrink it or enlarge it.
Is that a vector file that IDW gave you, or that you got from the internet, or that you made?
From the internet.
And thank you to the internet, not just the art collectors who share their artwork, but the professional and wannabe graphic designers who will vectorize popular logos and symbols.
I actually feel a little bad. I robbed you of an error that you would have spotted, but I picked it up in the script and fixed it. As the story was progressing and I read through to the end of the script, the very last time Major Blood fires a missile at the Baroness, the description was something like, blah, 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 Major Blood has 2 missiles left. And I was reading through and I was looking at my other pages. I'm like, that doesn't seem to add up right. So Larry had him firing at her 5 times, but there's only 4 missiles on the back of the Stinger. So I basically, when there would have been 2, I just drew 1 because he'd only have 1 left.
Excellent.
And I robbed you of this error. I'm sorry.
Oh, good spot.
I would take the robbing of the finding of the error over finding the error any day.
Excellent.
There used to be a pudding that was over-egged. You know the pudding. You know the pudding. At first it was British, but then it was Commonwealth. You know the pudding. You know the pudding. But now there's a new player in town, a comic book writer of some renown. He's using real-world examples and peppering the issues with lots of samples. It's a Larry Hama colloquialism. He's talking G.I. Joe and all its heroism. Can you guess what it is? Is it something new? Now listen as Larry drops a slice of real life on you.
Okay, so over to Larry Hama colloquialisms. The one that I spotted here was "Don't praise the day before sunrise," which is very similar to the Polish proverb "Don't praise the day before sunset." So I guess don't praise, don't say that something's all great before it's begun. Would be sunrise, and don't go overboard before it's finished would be sunset. The equivalent of "Don't count your chickens." But yeah, I like that. Don't praise the day before sunrise.
Quote of the week, 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 quote of the week.
Did you have a favourite line of dialogue? There wasn't anything that I'd actually picked out for that one.
Yeah, it's on the splash page. Wild Weasel. Those Technovipers risked everything to get us out of there, which is, I've already talked about how much I like this page as a breath, as a break, as a line in the story, a dividing line in the story.
Great. So I think that's us done talking about issue 280. Was there any sort of, I guess, concluding thoughts, ideas about the whole experience of putting it together, Ron, that you'd like to reflect on?
Nothing that really stands out. No, I'm sorry. I don't have a more interesting answer, and a more interesting answer to that.
And do you think you'd like to see more G.I. Joe work in the future? Is it a world that you'd like to return to?
Oh, sure. You know what I'd really love? I may be in the minority on this. I like the weirder stuff in the G.I. Joe books. Like, I loved all the Cobra Law stuff and Serpentor. I like the weird stuff more than the straightforward military stuff. Like I said, I'm probably in the minority in that, though.
What I'd love to see from Ron for a return to G.I. Joe. So Ron did full or loose pencils, but full inks on Revolutionaries, which was some G.I. Joe characters, but the Adventure Team and a slightly different version of Stalker and Hawk and Sergeant Savage, if I'm remembering correctly. So, and then with the Cobras Venom, some of that story was not inked by Ron. So what I'd like to see is whether it's a single issue or multiple issues, I'd like to see with sort of full deadline, without any kind of creeping deadline or heart attack. I'd like to see Ron come back to the Larry Hama Real American Hero series for a story of any length, with enough time to draw it to Ron's sort of full and complete standards, pencils and inks.
That would be lovely.
And maybe it can have some of the weirder stuff. So Serpentor's gone. Cobra Law is a definite no for the Larry Hama continuity.
Yeah.
But, there are still some weird Joes and Cobras, and certainly something could be made up just for that story.
Sure. I actually, when I was working on Cobras Venom, I put it out there into the universe, and by that I mean an email to Tom Walsh that I fell in love. I love Quinn, and I wouldn't mind doing some Quinn stories. And I'll tell you what, I would love to do like a Road Pig. I love Road Pig. I think he's ridiculous, but I love his character.
Well, I feel like you're setting up two Untold Tales right now. Or how about a Quinn Untold Tale? And the Road Pig story could happen right now. This need not be a flashback. I certainly could use some, a meaty Dreadnought adventure that takes place now.
Excellent. So I think that's us all done with 280 now. So let's talk toys.
Mark talks about toys, ho ho. He talks about G.I. Joe. He talks about all the toys from the comic book and the animated show. Mark talks about toys. Mark talks about toys.
And Ron, when we were talking earlier, we was just reflecting on some of your early encounters with G.I. Joe in your youth. So what were your memories of the G.I. Joe toys?
I had the original, the fuzzy-haired G.I. Joe with eagle-eye vision kung fu grip dolls back in the day. And my brother and I had we would have him fight like our Kiss dolls or our Shogun Warriors and whatnot. So I had the old school G.I. Joe. Sadly, I have no idea what those are. They're probably long gone. Have you ever seen one or held one? The ones with the little clicky joints in the elbows and the knees?
Yeah.
So we had those. We were stupid kids, and you didn't think they were gonna. We got rid of them or lost them or they got broken or whatever. And then when the smaller ones, the Hasbro figures came out, Torpedo was my very first one. And if you want to hear a stupid story, we had a pool in our backyard, and I would use Torpedo and my Wampa figure and my Hoth Ice playset in the pool, and I had this whole stupid Arctic superhero monster thing going on, and I'd have little action scenes in the pool.
That doesn't sound stupid at all. That sounds great. Where did you buy your toys?
Toys R Us, but there was a pharmacy chain called Genevieve's on Long Island that we had, that they would sometimes have these random little spots where they had action figures, and I would sometimes grab Transformers there too, but mostly Toys R Us.
Did you buy a lot of small Joe figures and vehicles, or were you sort of sampling the line?
You know, my brother had more Joes than I did, but we had a fairly decent collection of stuff.
Well, it sounds like you pooled your collection.
Yes, definitely. Alrighty. Wah, wah, wah. That's like one of my jokes.
Yeah, there's those crickets again.
Ron, what are you drawing right now? What project are you on?
I'm in the middle of drawing that Endanged book that Mark had mentioned earlier.
How far into it are you? When might you finish?
I'm penciling and inking it. Garrett Berner is lettering it. It was written by a man named Jon McCarthy.
What's your schedule like? When will you finish it? How far are you?
It's a much more looser schedule on that because there's a lot of design work that goes into it. So I'll draw some pages and then we look at future scenes and then we talk about it, map it out. I work pretty close with the writer and the creator. There's a lot of sci-fi tech stuff, so we bounce ideas back and forth. I'm about halfway done with issue 1, and I think he's going to be taking that to Kickstarter.
So it'll be a mini-series, not a
right.
original.
I believe it's a 3-issue. It's like a sci-fi, horror, dystopian future type of story with some monsters and whatnot.
How did you find the writer, or vice versa?
He found me. I think he just emailed me on Twitter one day or Facebook. I get a lot of like random emails on social media, and then I look into them, or I look into the person that's contacting me. And I'm like, all right, we can do something here. He had a pretty solid idea of what he wanted to do and how he wanted to do it. So we started talking, and then I landed that gig.
Cool. So, yeah, I think that's us all done. I think I can hear I can hear stirrings in the background that indicate that I'll probably be shouted at for taking too long from her indoors. We're all indoors, but not to worry. So yeah, it just leaves us to just thank you very much for taking the time for working through your audio issues so that we could get to talk to you.
Thank you so much, both of you.
Yeah, and best of wishes for your future project, and hopefully we'll see you back on Joe before too long. So people can find you in various places. I think Ron at RonJoseph717 on Twitter is one of those places. Want to call out any others?
I've actually got another RonJoseph717 on Instagram, but I'm not on that as much. Twitter and Facebook are probably the best ones, and I'm listed as Ron Joseph on Facebook.
So Tim, where can people find you?
Instagram, A Real American Book, Facebook, A Real American Book, and arealamericanbook.com.
I understand that there's an index on the website where people can find lots of articles that stretch back many years. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Good stuff. Excellent. So next time on Talking Joe, we'll be talking Disavowed and The Devil's Due issue 16 from 2003. And then back here on the regular ARAH update, we will be talking issue 281. It should be out, I think, next week when this episode drops. It's called Murder by Assassination and is a brand new arc picking up the events after Snake Hunt with new artist Andrew Griffiths. So look forward to seeing that. You can find us in all of the usual places. talkingjoe.co.uk is the website that has all of those places to find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and our contact details, as well as the Patreon, which can be found at patreon.com/talkingjoe. So thanks to all of our backers, Jay, Sam, Richard. So when all is said and done, you can catch us down the road.
Because we've been Talking Joe.
And we're all out of Joes. Thank you, Ron.
Thanks, Ron. This was great.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.